ask yourself, what's the 20% that you can actually put in place today off the back of this particular seminar or webinar, right, that can produce an 80% return for yourself, right? Because there's this thing called law of diminishing returns, right? What you want to do is you want to get this steepness part of the curve, because once you hit this point of diminishing returns, the more you work doesn't necessarily mean the more results you're going to get, more productive or more efficient you're going to be. Okay, well, may as well get started now. 32 attendees. All right, so here we are. Thank you very much for coming along, guys. I've been invited by Matt Hoskins and Cameron from Student Guild, from the GUGC Student Guild, to present to you guys about what kind of financial strategies, tactics, and tips and hints and tricks that you can do, incorporate in your lives to lower the stress a little bit, because during uncertain times it's quite difficult to plan ahead. So what you can do with these particular slides and with this webinar is hopefully incorporate a few gems that you can take away and actually implement and execute against them for your lives. So let's get started. Now, typical disclaimer for all financial professionals: this is just general information. This is not personal advice, so don't take it that way. Okay, moving on. Now, overview is this. A little bit about myself, what to expect, covering off on the minimum viable lifestyle, which will be covered off in more detail in webinar 2 next week, to improve cash flow, navigating bureaucracy, when all else fails, get debt, and how to wrap it up and essentially do a Q&A towards the end. If you do have questions throughout the whole process, make sure you type it in, because I do have a Q&A window open. So if it is pertinent to the specific topic that I'm covering off on, make sure to write it then, so that I may be able to kind of do a little bit of a segue, and it'd be great to answer a range of your questions as they come through. All right, so a little bit about myself. So I studied at Griffith University, did a Bachelor of Biomedical Science, got a first class honours, and started a PhD, worked in science for a little while. And as I was working, I found myself talking to a bunch of scientists about their finances, and I thought to myself, I think this is it. And as I was growing up, I didn't really have that much growing up, and I had that chip on my shoulder where I was always wondering, well, how the hell do I actually get ahead in life? I was on track. I was trying to get into med at the time, purely because my point of reference in life was my auntie. My positive financial point of reference in life was my auntie, who's medico, right? So I thought, okay, she's doing well, I may as well go for that. Now, I started investing as soon as I became a scientist on my way, hoping to get into medicine, right? And during that time, my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, replaced our income with a result from our investments, right? So what we did was we bought a few homes and we renovated, revalued, pulled the equity out and got refinanced, and basically had a bunch of cash in our hands. And I thought, wow, this is something, right? So I'm always an avid learner. So I've always read personal development books and the like. So off the back of that, I decided, well, I think I may as well make a shift. Instead of going for med, I caught myself talking to all the scientists about their finances and said, you know what, I think there's a career here for me, because I can't stop speaking to people about their finances. So that's pretty much me. So I went from science onto finance. This is back in 2012. And I did 1 year's worth of training in the banks and decided to can that, purely because, look, the way they worked wasn't really quite my cup of tea. So I decided to go down the path of independent Australian financial services license, and started my business within my mentor's business at the time, and decided to move out 2.5 years later as I built enough confidence to start my own. And this is Plenitude Wealth. We started in 2016, and here I am today. One of the goals within Plenitude Wealth is to educate 1 million Australians before we hit 10 years worth of business. That's at 2027. So this is part and parcel of what we do. We educate as many people as possible. We try and pump out as much content as we can in all social media platforms to ensure that we're trying to educate as many Aussies as possible to increase their financial confidence, to ultimately get to financial resilience. Right? That's the game that we're playing. I've got 3 little girls. I've got Addie here, who's almost 4, Ella, who's almost 3, and Ceci, who's currently 9 months. She's walking. She's a fast learner, which is awesome. My wife, co-founder of Plenitude Wealth, Plenitude Lend, is Sophie. So enough about me. Let's get on with the good stuff, right? Okay, so what to expect. Now, what am I going to be covering off on is essentially covering off on the 80-20 rule, the Pareto's principle. Has anyone ever heard of this? Can you put a hand up if you can, if you have heard of the 80-20 rule? Hands up. Okay, not as many. Yep, cool. Yep, and we'll go over that. A mindset, talking about how you can kind of train yourself to have that resourceful mindset. Goal setting, some of you may have heard of the SMART goal setting, that acronym. Breakdown of future webinars as well, which I'm sure some of you will see a ton of value, and then bring it all together. Yep, cool. Okay, so Pareto's principle. Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian philosopher who lived in, I believe he lived in France for a little while there, came up with this 80-20 rule, right? The idea here is if you can find 20% of the actions that you can take to produce 80% of the results, you're winning, right? So have a think about what you've done in the past. Like the idea that comes to my mind is back in the day when I was studying, I would do 80% I would get 80% of the results off the back of 20% of the studies, which is crammed into the final week before sitting that exam, right? Or crammed into the final day, final few hours, whatever it may be, for finishing up those assignments. Right, so ask yourself, what's the 20% that you can actually put in place today off the back of this particular seminar or webinar, right, that can produce an 80% return for yourself, right? Because there's this thing called law of diminishing returns, right? What you want to do is you want to get this steepness part of the curve, because once you hit this point of diminishing returns, the more you work doesn't necessarily mean the more results you're going to get, more productive or more efficient you're going to be, right? So you got to ask yourself, what's the best bang for buck? What's the low-hanging fruit that you can actually put in place to ensure that A, you're not stressing out too much, B, you've got options and flexibility that you want in your life and finances, and C, a little bit happier, right? That's the key to this thing, right? So always understand that there are low-hanging fruits, and perfection is not necessarily the best place to go for, because you could be using your time, because your time is a resource, to put into other little projects and other tactics that may get you a massive returns. That's the idea here. Any questions on this? Is it all making sense, guys? Hands up if it's making sense for you guys. I've got 4 hands up. 6, 9, excellent. 16, fantastic. 18. Okay, good stuff, guys. So it's making sense for almost half of you. Now, should I spend more time on this thing? Because if I can't get more than half of you to actually put your hand up and click on that button, I may have to waste more time on Pareto's principle and the law of diminishing returns. Let's give it another crack, guys. One more time. Come on, click on that raise your hand thing. Let's see how many we can get up to. We got up to 18 last time. Okay, 22, 26. Okay, 27. Can we get up over 30? Yes, we have. Okay, I'm happy to move forward now. Fantastic. We're at 43 attendees at the moment. Thank you very much, guys. Okay, so ask yourself, what is it that you'd like to achieve? What are the results? Do you want to increase your cash flow? Do you want to lower your expenses? Do you want to hit your goals? Do you want to find that job? Do you want to get an internship? Whatever it may be, work out the list of stuff that you want to achieve in your life for the short term, right? Because we can only really plan for the short term with the uncertainty that's involved with this pandemic. Create that list and create a plan of attack moving forward, right? So the mindset is key with this thing, because a lot of people have got this kind of down and trodden, victim mentality, right? What you want to do is get out of that kind of mindset and put yourself in a position where you've got that growth mindset to allow you to actually see the solutions, right? Let the solutions come to you. Because if you've got a closed mindset, what's going to happen is it's going to be very, very difficult to ask the right questions. Because instead of asking the questions, what typically happens is you say statements like, I can't do it, it's too hard, that kind of stuff, right? The most beautiful question that you can ask yourself is how? How the hell do I achieve result A? How do I achieve result B? How do I make things go faster for myself, right? That's the beautiful question. make sure you know and understand and own what you're trying to achieve in life. And if you can ask yourself those beautiful questions, right? And if you start chunking it down and ensure you don't freak out about it and then you don't have high stress levels, right? What happens is you free yourself up with a whole bunch of time. You be a little bit more proactive, productive, and produce a hell of a lot more results for yourself, right? So if you guys want to read a book that covers off on the growth and closed mindset, a book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, is really, really good one. I suggest you read that if you're into that stuff. Now, the idea here is we're in a time of massive uncertainty, obviously. There's all sorts of stuff going on. The economy is sort of going up and down, very volatile at the moment. Obviously, you're in a situation where you're probably taking all your classes online. Some of you may have lost your jobs. Hands up if you've lost jobs or lowered hours at the very least, right? So it's a tough gig at the moment. Yep. So 18, almost half of you guys have lowered hours and lost jobs. So yeah, I'm sure it's really, really tough. So what you need to do is, instead of seeing this as a massive, massive negative in your life, yes, see it as a negative and own that, but use it and reassociate it as an opportunity to actually put yourself in a position to use it as a resource for yourself, because this thing will most likely never happen to you ever again, right? So what you want to do is experience what you have to experience, feel the pain that you're going through, and reassociate that into an opportunity to grow. Because what this is stress. What typically happens with stress is it creates that kind of feeling of compression. And with massive compression, right? I mean, the analogy that comes to my head is that that's how diamonds are made, right? So you wanna make sure you own this stress and you come out bigger, stronger, faster, more powerful at the end of this pandemic, right? So how do you do that? You need to be open to the idea of being a little bit more resourceful, right? Now we've got time, we've got our health, and we don't have much money at the moment because some of you have lost your jobs and lowered your incomes. So what you need to do is work out a way to be a little bit more resourceful with your time and with your health to ensure you up your wealth to get to a comfortable level at the very, very least. Right? Very, very important, because we don't want to get to a stage where we're constantly sort of thinking to ourselves, shit, I've got nothing else to do. I've got no options in front of me. And you put yourself in a stage where you're stressed out to the max and you're not really moving forward. And this is where, people get depressed and all that kind of stuff. We don't want to get to that stage. We want to get to a mindset that's going to be a go-getter mindset, and ask a bunch of people a range of questions to ensure that you can actually move forward with a little bit of confidence, right? That's the key to this thing. Any questions with this? Now the key is to just kind of keep your minds open and attack it with vigor, right? It all makes sense, I'm sure. Cool. So next part is SMART goals. So back to the list that I was talking about. So with this particular one right here, so you're creating a list, right? So ask yourself, well, write down that list. If you've got a piece of paper right now, make sure to write down that list. Ask yourself, what are the most crucial results that you want in your life to reduce the stress, right? And with that list, create SMART goals. And hands up for the people who've heard of SMART goals before. Okay, cool. Yep, 20, excellent. So around half of you guys. So SMART, it's essentially giving you a framework or a rubric to work with to ensure that your goals don't become too overwhelming for you, right? So make it specific. With the specific, make sure you're asking yourself a yes or no question, right? Make sure you ask yourself a yes or no question and make it measurable, right? The idea here is to build enough momentum for yourself so that you can actually achieve the result. Celebrate the small wins, right? It's got to be achievable, obviously. Like right now, if you're earning, let's say $300 per week, right? You don't want to set a goal of $10,000 per week, right? You want something that's achievable, right? Not impossible, but not so unachievable that it sort of pushes you down, right? You want your motivation levels high, and what you do is you slowly, incrementally build that up. So instead of going for 10K per week, maybe go for 350 per week, and then ask yourself the question, how, right? That's the big magical question that you need to ask yourself every single day and optimize for the best outcome possible. Yeah, obviously we're going through achievable. Now relevant. Relevance is very, very important, because if it's not relevant to your life, it's not really going to give you the motivation to keep doing it, right? So you got to ask yourself, what are the key things that you want in your life in the short term, right, to be able to take action, right? Okay, cool. Next one is time bound. Set yourself a time frame, right? If you don't set yourself a time frame, what typically happens is you kind of push it out, push it out, push it out. That's why universities are so good at what they do, because they set a deadline, right? Has anyone heard of Parkinson's law? Hands up if you've heard of Parkinson's law at all. Okay, only a few of you guys. Parkinson's law basically dictates that, tells people that you get the majority done prior to the deadline, just before the deadline, right? So if you can set yourself realistic goals, right? Specific, measurable, and achievable and relevant goals, and put a deadline that's reasonable, not like 5 minutes from now, not like 1 day from now, especially if it's a big goal, you can really start seeing the momentum build for yourself. Very, very important, because if you don't set goals with this in mind, what typically happens is you tend to get freaked out, right? You get analysis through paralysis, right? What happens is if every dot point here is a goal, you're creating this massive thing in your head, and it becomes too complicated, right? So what you want to do is uncomplicate it some way, somehow. How do you do that? You need to chunk it down, make it more simpler, right? So that the goals become a hell of a lot easier, and use this particular rubric, like the SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. Now it's got to be relevant, because if it's not relevant, you're not going to do it day in, day out, right? Some of you may have to study something. YouTube is a great resource to study how to create something, how to design something potentially, because if you're struggling for cash, what you need to do is increase your income some way, somehow, right? There are only two options that you've got: to increase your income or lower your expenses. We'll be going through a few of those options a little bit later. Yeah. Any questions on this before I move on? Yes. Okay. So how to be optimistic most of the time? Look, it's a muscle that you have to train. It's really as simple as that. One of the key things that you need to do, if you're trying to be as optimistic as you can, is A, don't delude yourself first and foremost, right? You've got to be realistic. Optimism is not necessarily delusion, right? And B, make sure that you're listening to positive people who are teaching you specific skills, who are using the right words, right? You don't want to associate yourself with people who are constantly negative, putting you down, right? You want to make sure that you surround yourself with people who are trying to help you move forward, celebrating your wins when you get the win, right? And people who you're comfortable sharing your goals with. Very, very important. Your environment is key, right? You need to make sure that you nurture your environment so that you can actually increase the likelihood of kicking those goals, because the biggest influences you've got are the 5 closest people around you. And if they're very, very negative towards your goals and what you're doing in life, you may need to reassess how much time you're spending with them and how much you actually value their advice and their opinions, right? Very, very important. Next question: how to stick to those goals when no one else, like the course convener, is breathing down your neck? Look, in the end of the day, you really need to learn how to manage your time a little bit more, right? Back to the Pareto's principle. Like, if you're a perfectionist, it doesn't really make sense to aim for 100%. 85% will do if you're looking for that high distinction, right? If you're happy, you got to look at what the next step is. What's the job that you're looking for after your particular degree? What are the hurdles to actually get in? Is it a GPA of 5 hurdle? Is it a GPA of 6 hurdle? Is it a GPA of 6.5? Whatever it may be, and ask yourself, maybe if you're feeling too stressed and you need to sort of reprioritize, maybe it's okay to lose a point in your GPA for 1 or 2 or 3 of your subjects, depending on how many subjects you're doing, obviously. Right? You need to really work out what is the end point, or what's the next best step post-university, and see if you can rejig your priorities and manage your time accordingly, right? Okay, any other things? We've got 2 more. to drag things out. Any advice on how to manage this? Look, in terms of dragging things out, set yourself some goals. Put it out in public, right? Tell your friends about it so that they can give you some crap if you don't hit your goals, right? Set yourself a timeline that is absolutely, it's really, really difficult to achieve, and make sure you have a carrot and a stick at the back end of it. What are the consequences associated with you not actually achieving it? Very, very important, because if you don't have any consequences, guess what? You're going to keep dragging it out. If you keep dragging and dragging and dragging and dragging, there's more and more of your time wasted. And unfortunately, you won't get much done, right? You've got to ask yourself, what in your particular environment is slowing you down? What are the things that you can control, right? And get rid of the things that you can't. Well, don't worry about the things that you can't control, but all the things that you can control and the things within that sphere that's actually slowing you down, get rid of it. It's really as simple as that, guys, right? You need to make sure you audit what you've got in front of you, what your influences are in your life, audit how much time you're spending on all of the social media stuff, potentially Netflix if you're into that, or YouTube, that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, everyone's got this vice, right? I've got an issue with YouTube. I can't help but watch YouTube videos. But in the end of the day, you've got to sort of audit yourself, otherwise you won't hit your goals, right? That's the stick. So you got to ask yourself, well, what do you need a bigger stick? Do you need to put a bet on for your friends? $10 bet if you don't achieve something by X amount of time. That kind of stuff. You need to find out ways to motivate yourself. Self-awareness is key when you're setting yourself some goals, because it's very, very easy to lose one and not move forward and get bogged down with it. Right? What you need to understand is that it's okay to lose, and it's okay to miss a goal, because there's always tomorrow to set another one. Yeah? Cool. Any other questions before I move on? Smart goals. Excellent. All right, financial goals. So right now, what we want to do is save as much money as we can. Obviously, with your current situation, not every single one of you are earning money or as much money as you would have been earning a few weeks ago. So what you need to ensure you do is find out what your minimum viable lifestyle is, which I'll go through over the next few slides. But for some of you who are currently working and are trying to build your finances up to a stage where you're becoming a little bit more resilient, what you need to do is stay away from this thing called lifestyle creep, right? The problem in life is that as your income grows, right, lifestyle typically grows with it, and you're on this 45-degree angle, right? And this is where people live week to week. You do not want to have $0 in your bank account every weekly, because all it takes is one event to sideswipe you, and that's when the stress levels increases, skyrockets, and then you'll start to kind of stress out and wonder what the hell's going on, and it could lead to all sorts of other stuff, right? So what you want to do is ensure that instead of working on a 45-degree angle, right, you can work on, let's say, a 30-degree angle and save all that money. And what can you put that money towards? Put it towards what you value most, i.e. holidays, let's say, buying a new car potentially, saving up for a house potentially, going to buy coffees for potential mentors in the near future, whatever it may be, right? Because what you need to do as students is actually network as best as you can with people in the industry that you're aiming to get into, right? What I suggest all of the students that I help in the past is always offer to buy mentors coffee, right? Just give them a call. Go onto LinkedIn, create a LinkedIn account. Make sure that you're in a position where you can actually reach out to people, connect with them, and say, look, I've been following you, I've been following your particular career, and I've always been curious as to how you got to that stage. Can I buy you a coffee to just pick your brain? It'll only be 10-15 minutes of your time, right? This is what you can do. Save that money, right? Save that money, put yourself in a small account specific to grow your career, right? Specific to actually increase the likelihood of moving forward and actually nabbing that first job out of uni, or potentially getting an internship whilst you're in uni, right? These are the things you need to do. You do not want to be spending on all sorts of lifestyle stuff, right? You don't want to spend on like a ridiculously expensive car. You want to have some kind of buffer in place, right? To ensure that you've got some flexibility to protect your time, your health, and build your wealth, right? Very, very important, right? To play in this middle area here. Very important, guys. Okay. So in financial variables, obviously income is very, very important, and capital is important too, because if income suddenly is gone, you've only got this much capital left. Let's say you've got $2,000 in an account and you don't have an income. Well, guess what? You're going to have to work out how long you can keep $2,000 for over the next 2-3 months potentially, or 2 weeks or 1 week, depending on how long you can drag that out for, until you can get enough income to actually top that up. That's the game that you're playing. You need to make sure you become a little bit more resourceful with your time, right? To increase the likelihood of you building wealth, right? Creating an income for yourself, to be able to save more, right? To be able to save more, to achieve the goals that you would have set for yourself here, right? Very, very important. Is that making sense, guys? Hands up if it's making sense. Awesome. Good stuff. Really, any questions before I move forward? Go. So this brings us to uncertain times and buffers, right? So what I was talking about was saving as much as you can so that you can build yourself a buffer, right? So what you want to do is get out of the discomfort zone, right? This is the issue where you've only got less than 2 weeks, potentially 1 day's worth of lifestyle expenses, right? In your account. You want to get to a stage where you're slowly saving up for a 3-month sustainable buffer. Now, obviously that's easy to say, hard to do, but what you need to do is set yourself that goal and actually motivate yourself to do that, right? You've got to be self-aware enough to put away some time to build up enough income for yourself so that you can siphon a small amount to achieve the things that you value most in life, right? Slowly but surely, building a buffer should be one of these particular goals that you have, right? Because if you can put away $10 a week, let's say, it grows over time, right? You might not get to a 3-month worth of buffer in a year, but you'll have something, better than having less than a week and living week to week, because there's nothing worse than having stress in your life, right? Because if you're constantly stressed, that lowers the resourcefulness, right? Lowers the flexibility and lowers the options that you have in front of you. And it probably reduces the results that you're going to get, right? Bad stress. Obviously, you can use stress to your advantage as well, but you don't want to be chronically stressed out because that's not good for your health as well, right? So ultimately, what you want to do is get to a stage where you're aiming for this freedom part, right? 1 year worth of income. If you can get there, happy days. The pandemic can hit, suddenly you got 1 year's worth of income in the bank. It's all good. You can rejig your life. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. Focus on health, focus on protecting your family, whatever it may be, right? So the key is with a buffer provides you with massive freedom and flexibility, right? Main aim is to get out of within 1 week or 2 weeks, paycheck to paycheck. Just slowly siphon money away. One of the key things that you can do with this is to create a bank account, right? Establish a new bank account over in one of the other banks. Make sure it's free, right? Siphon money in there. They'll obviously give you a card. Make sure you cut that card off. Cut the card so that the barrier to entry is a hell of a lot higher than grabbing that card that you've got and swiping. Get rid of the internet, right? Internet banking for that particular account. Siphon and automate it every single time you get paid. For those of you who are currently working, right? Every single time you get paid, you automate $5 per week, $10 per week, 20, 30, 50, whatever you can afford to actually hit this buffer. Because if you can get this buffer, the peace of mind you're going to get from having a buffer is massive, right? It takes away a massive strain on your shoulders because you know that you've got emergency funds available to you, right? And if you know if the SH1T hits the fan, it's all good, pardon my French, right? Cool, moving on. So future webinars. So we're looking at the minimum viable lifestyle for webinar number 2, which is covered off on next Wednesday. In a fortnight's time, we'll be talking about improving cash flow and ensuring that we cover off in more detail on how to go about that. Navigating bureaucracy, it's essentially covering off on super. How do you extract money out of super? How do you negotiate lowering of rent, that kind of stuff. And when all else fails, get debt in webinar number 5. So obviously every single Wednesday from 2 to 3 for the next 4 Wednesdays, I'll be here. I'll be talking about these in more detail. So today's more of a helicopter view on that, right? So what I might do is I'll quickly launch a poll for you guys, and I'd be interested to find out what is most interesting for you at the moment. So please feel free to answer this poll. Thanks very much. I'll close it off in about 15 seconds time, so answer quick if you can. That'd be great. Good stuff. All right, closing it off in 10 seconds. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good stuff. So minimum viable lifestyle and improving cash flow seems to be the big one. Navigating bureaucracy is the next one. And then the debt, no one's really interested in that one. That's interesting. Okay, here are the results. Cool. All right, so the minimum viable lifestyle. So this particular thing is a bit of a calculation that everyone has to do, in my opinion. If you're going to plan ahead, this is a perfect opportunity to actually create a reference point for yourself, right? One of the key things that I always tell people who come and try and get my help from the financial planning side is, what is your minimum viable lifestyle? What is the lowest point in your life where you've had the lowest income and you've survived, right? This is the perfect opportunity for you guys to work out this thing, because this is going to be your point of reference, your baseline for the rest of your life, right? There's never been a time in your life where you're going to be earning the least amount of money, right? There's going to be times of this, obviously, as soon as you finish your degree, you'll be looking for jobs, you'll be working full time. Hopefully this bloody COVID-19 goes away and we can get on with our lives, get back to normalcy again, and start working and earning some cash, right? So as soon as you finish your uni, ideally your income will start moving up, right? So the question that you have to ask yourself is, where does the minimum viable lifestyle sit, and how long can you keep it there, right? Because back to the particular graph here, right? Lifestyle creep, right? Most people get that job, right? And essentially, as the income grows, their lifestyle increases. So where I'm going with the MVP, the minimum viable lifestyle, MVL I should say, is what is a solid reference point for you. Because some of you will be getting out of uni and earning 50 grand, others will be 90, others 160, depending on what kind of industry that you're working in, right? And what you can do is you can actually set a reference point for yourself with your minimum viable lifestyle, right? And what happens is then, as your income increases, what you can do is you can do this, right? And potentially increase it like that. And what happens is, or increase it the same way, what happens is that extra bit, this extra bit there, will provide you with a whole range of options, right? That's the gig, right? You want options in your life, you want flexibility, you want adaptability to keep moving forward in your career, to invest in yourself, personal development, career development, courses, whatever it may be that kind of propels you in your career, or to invest in your portfolio to allow you to move careers if need be, similar to what I did, right? I was lucky enough to have a portfolio to back me to be able to make a move from science to finance. If I didn't have that, I would be stuck in science wondering how the hell do I get out of science? I would have invested 10 years of my life rather than 4, right, into science, and I would have been scratching my head thinking, crap, I should have done more stuff. So this is the key thing here. By understanding your minimum viable lifestyle and creating a reference point for yourself, as soon as you start earning money, it will allow you to have an investment portfolio, a buffer, and a point of reference that you can revert back to if or when you lose a job, right? Or you need to pivot, or you make, so ultimately what you're trying to do is to find out what the minimum dollars you need on a weekly basis. So quick exercise for you guys. What you need to do is write down what is your rent, right? How much is rent costing you on a week-to-week basis, right? Some of you maybe 190, some free, some 200, some 300, right? So what you need to do is ask yourself, is it necessary to pay that rent, right? Can you lower it? How do you lower it? If you've got an extra bedroom in your house, can you put another housemate in there, right? Can you, if you're living with your parents and you're currently paying rent, can you ask for a bit of a reprieve at the moment because of the low hours? You've got to ask yourself, what is the minimum amount that you need to pay for that rent? Write that number down. The next thing is food. Next thing is petrol. So food, what do you do with food? Are you eating out all the time? Are you eating takeaways? Can you make a sandwich instead? Can you lower your food costs to, let's say, $2 to $3 per meal rather than $5 to $10 or $20 per meal, right? Because if we do a quick calculation with food, right? If we get an average of $2 per meal at 3 meals per day, at 7 days per week, right? We're looking at, so 2 times 3 times 7. My calculator just played up on the bench. This should be reasonably straightforward, but that's okay. 42. So $42 per week. Obviously, that's a little bit. That's really taking it too far. $2 per meal. Right? But if you can get there, and if you can keep that point of reference in your toolbox, what you've done is you've created a baseline for your food, right? A baseline for your rent, right? A baseline for petrol potentially, right? Public transport. You need to ask yourself, what are the key things that you spend most of your money on, right? One way to do so, if you're unaware of where your money's going, is have a look at a bank statement. So if you've got internet banking, what you can do is log into your internet banking, look at your statement from your main account. If you've only got one account, if you've got multiple accounts, guess what? You're going to have to look at all of them, all of the statements, right? Look at it line item per line item and ensure that you understand what it is. And if you can cut it out, because if you're under the pump and if you don't have the money to survive, you're going to need to fix that, aren't you? You're going to run out of cash straight away and stress levels will increase. It'll increase the likelihood of you really, really stressing out and not performing at the levels that you want for your studies, right? For your relationships in life, and it just leads to negativity. Right? So what you need to do is audit all of your expenses and see how low you can get it. Right? What you need to understand is that you need to look at what your essential expenses are. Write that down and come up with a particular number that you need on a week-to-week basis, which leads us into how do you get to that number, right? In the cash flow side of things. Then calculating the runway. If you've got a buffer, i.e., let's say $2,000 in the account and you don't have any income, so you need to ask yourself, well, if food's $42 per week and rent is $150 per week, right? And a few other miscellaneous expenses that you may have, let's just call it another $50 per week. So that's $242 per week that you need to survive, right? So you got 2,000 divided by 240. Guess what? You got 8 weeks. So you got to ask yourself, well, how much buffer do you have? How much savings do you have? If you have no savings, guess what? You've got to find the income to ensure you can tick off your minimum viable lifestyle. That's the game. Is this making sense, guys? Hands up if it's making sense. Good stuff. Yeah, so the idea is to get this and etch it in your brain. And this is a very, very powerful thing, because I can tell you right now, if you can work out a way to live off, let's say $20,000 per year, or in this case, $15,000 or $10,000 per year in your case, right? Once you start working, and if you know off the back of your, in the back of your head and in your toolbox that you lived off $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 per year, what you can do is save and invest the rest and create the future and the ideal lifestyle that you want, right? That's the game. So take this as an opportunity. Yes, it's bloody hard. It's difficult, right? Especially when you're under the pump with uni, work, commitments, managers, whatever it may be, parents kind of breathing down your neck, whoever's putting pressure on you, what you need to do is see it as an opportunity to create a baseline for yourself. Because this particular situation right now can only make you stronger if you see it as an opportunity. That's the key. Yeah? Cool. Moving on to the next one, improving cash flow. So how can you raise cash, right? The first question that comes to my mind is, what can you sell, right? If you're desperate for money, if you don't have a runway, if you need $250, $300 per week, and if you don't have any money and you don't have a job, guess what? You're gonna have to sell something, right? So you got your things or time, right? You need to become a little bit more resourceful. And the question that you need to ask yourself is how, every single time, how do you improve your cash flow? And find yourself other points of references, right? Because some of your friends may be in the same position, but they're a little bit more comfortable because they've got their own little side business, right? They're doing something for their parents, or they're doing something for a small business, right? Ask people if they need any help, right? That's a good starting point, right? So you're gonna ask yourself, what can you sell and what can you use your time? Can you get onto Fiverr, Airtasker to help people, right? I can tell you right now, there's a market for students, let's say, to actually go out there and do the shopping for the elderly, for example. Do the shopping for people who are in, let's say, in their houses and under house arrest or under quarantine, right? There's a market there. If you've got design skills, there's a market there. If you can write, if you can write essays, if you can write sales copy, for example, there's a market there too, right? If you don't have any of these particular skills, what you need to do is come up with a list of things that you're good at, right? And see how you can make a product or a service out of it, right? And look for points of references in YouTube, for example, to help you get on your way and become a freelancer to see you through the uncertain times, right? You have to become a little bit more resourceful with your time. Yes, I'm not saying drop all Netflix and all that, but guess what? If you don't have $300 and you need 300, right, to live and to survive, you're gonna need to bust your butt to make sure that you actually get there. Otherwise, things may go awry for you, right? We don't want that. We want to make sure that you're as comfortable as possible, with as little stress as possible. And how do you do that? You need to get your resourcefulness mindset up to a standard where nothing can really touch you. Now, obviously, this can't happen overnight. What you need to do is you need to exercise, just like kind of building muscles in the gym. What you need to do is you need to exercise that resourcefulness mindset, right? Ask yourself these questions. How do I make it better? Who do I follow? Who do I kind of work with to pick up a few ideas? Which friends have done well? What ideas do they have? Are they willing to share? Can we do something together, right? You need to find new ways to monetize your skills. If you don't have too many skills, you need to find ways to monetize your time, right? Or if you've got a bunch of things, maybe you can sell it. Have a look at what they're going for on eBay. Look at Facebook Marketplace, right? Very important, right? See how much things are going for. Maybe you can sell them there. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. It's really as simple as that, right? The right way to ask for a loan from your parents. This is a big one. Now, the right way to ask for a loan is to find out what your minimum viable lifestyle is, and then work out, let's say you need 3 months worth of minimum viable lifestyle. You go to your parents, mum and dad, I've done the calculations, right? This is how much my rent is. This is how much food I'm budgeting for, right? This is how much petrol I need. This is how much all of the stuff that you actually need in your life, no partying, right? Very important, right? And then say, this is how much I need for the next 3 months. Can you loan it to me? They may not agree on a big lump sum, but they may agree to send it through to you on a week-to-week basis. Or they may agree to send half of it to you, or a quarter, depending on what you're doing. Now, if you tell them that you're getting onto Fiverr, you're getting onto Airtasker, you're trying your hardest to be a little bit more resourceful, being a little bit more entrepreneurial in your endeavors, what happens is they'll be a little bit more open to the idea of lending you money. Now, if you don't have parents, right, that can help, maybe you have friends, right? Obviously a little bit harder, but if you come with a plan, at the very least, it gives you a higher likelihood of getting somewhere, right? I suggest you go, you instead of getting a big loan, you go with a little bits and bobs, right? And work out a way to get them their money back, right? Because that's the key. If people are lending you money, you need to make sure that you're showing them a way that you're going to pay them back, right? Otherwise, they're not going to do it for you. And ideally, you provide them with a return on investment, a percentage, right? Whether it be 5%, 10%, 20%. Ideally, you want to be working around that 5% mark per annum, right? If they're broke themselves, they probably won't have much money to their name. But if you come up with a compelling reason or compelling case for them to actually lend you that money, guess what? They may lend you half of what you need this week, right? Very important to know your numbers, because if you know your minimum viable lifestyle, and if you know how much money is in your bank, therefore you know what the gap is, right? If you've got a larger amount in your bank account, right? Larger amount in your bank account, and you need this much, guess what? You got 5 weeks, right? Because you multiply that out by 5, right? You got 5 weeks worth of income. So you need to ask yourself, well, what is it that you need, right? Everyone's in a different position. So you need to understand your numbers to ensure that you can move forward with a little bit more confidence and start planning a little bit more, right? Planning it effectively, very important. Any questions on this before I move forward? Is it all making sense? Hands up if it's making sense, guys. Awesome. Good stuff. All right, so navigating bureaucracy. In webinar number 4, we'll be talking about how to postpone your bills, right? So what you can potentially do is call your phone, call Telstra, call Optus, call whoever and say, look, struggling a little bit. Can I postpone paying this month's bills? Can I pay you next year instead? I've got 2 more years to go, 1 more year to go. Can I postpone it? I want to be a good customer, right? So you got to ask yourself, how do you do that? Going back to your statements, right? Back to your bank statements. Every single line item that you have on that bank statement, right? Ask yourself the question, can I lower this particular payment or get rid of it straight away, right? So the first thing is, what are the essential items? And then the next one is discretionary. So if it's discretionary, and if you're desperate for some cash, get rid of it. Don't pay any money towards these things. You may need to stop partying for a little while. You may need to stop going to takeaway places for a little while. You may need to kind of scrimp and save and eat mee goreng. Don't worry, I've been there, done that, right? You need to do what you need to do. When things are tight, you just need to get a little bit more resourceful. Understand your numbers so that you don't freak out. That's the key, yeah? So go back to your bank statements and see what bills you can call to sort of negotiate a little bit. Tell them you've been there, you've been customers of theirs for X number of years. How many years have you been customers of them, right? And say, look, this is where I'm at. Just lost my job. Can I get some kind of a leeway on the fees this month? Can I pay for it at a future date? Can I come up with a payment plan for you where I'm paying 5% or 10% of this particular bill to see me through for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, right? So these are the questions that you can ask. These particular ideally essential costs that you have, right? How to make a case for rent reductions. Similar conversation. If your name is currently on the rent roll, right? You can speak to your tenant and your landlord. Make sure you build a case for yourself. Add the numbers, add as much specific information in there, and add a solution, right? If you're trying to lower your rent, you're going to need to come up with a way to say, okay, I know you're going to be $400 out of pocket over a 5-week period, 6-week period, whatever it may be. But what I plan to do is pay that back over a 1-year period. Please help me out. I'm in a bit of a bind at the moment, right? If some of you have super, what you can do is actually access your super as well. So you can go to the MyGov website if you've got a MyGov account. If you don't, create one, right? Go to the MyGov account, go to your account, and express your interest in accessing your super if you've got super, because desperate times calls for desperate measures, right? You can go for a hardship provision in that space, right? And actually withdraw some cash out of your super. The maximum that you can withdraw is $10,000 within a financial year. So if you've been working and if you're lucky enough to have about $20,000, $30,000 in your super, I know some of you may not be there, or most of you may not be there because a lot of you are students, right? You may be able to pull out a few grand just to kind of see you through back to understanding what your minimum viable lifestyle is. If you've got that, it puts you in a position to actually plan. And ideally, you want to plan for 3 to 6 months, right? All making sense? Hands up if it's making sense. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. Okay, debt and its role, right? How to get into debt, lowering long-term impact. Obviously, debt can be a double-edged sword, right? Not all debt is bad debt, but in your case, if you're getting into debt to survive, it's going to be bad debt. But if you're desperate, you're desperate. If it's the only solution you can come up with, you're forced to do it, aren't you? So the key is to look for a percentage as low as possible, right? Some banks have out there have like no frills credit cards at 9% per annum cost, right? So what you need to understand is that there's a limit, a credit card limit that they give you. If they give you that credit card, right, what happens is, let's say they give you a $2,000 limit credit card. What you can do is actually spend that straight away and then suddenly start incurring some of that interest, right? Some credit cards have a 55-day interest-free period, right? So maybe 55 days will be enough to see you through, right? So the big question is, can you get a credit card to do that? Personal loans, a bit harder because you need to substantiate your income. Obviously, Afterpay, if you've got Afterpay already, you can set that up. The question is, well, what are you paying? What are you using Afterpay for? Is it actually necessary? Is it essential? Or is it discretionary? can you get rid of it? Will it affect you if you get rid of it, right? Because ideally you want to lower your discretionary spending to as low as possible within this time frame, when it's a bunch of uncertainty in your hands, right? You want to make sure you lower your essential as best as you can, lock that in, and then use that as a tool for future investments. Very important, guys. Okay, so today we talked about the Pareto's principle, resourcefulness, and that particular mindset that you need, a bit of goal setting, and about the webinars that we're going to be covering off on in the near future. So before I finish up, guys, I've got about 3 minutes. Do you guys have any questions at all for me? Hands up if that added value. Awesome. And are there any other topics that you'd like to hear from me over the next 4 weeks? Because I'll be spending an hour every single time. So if you can share a few things, that'll be fantastic. Okay. Yes, you will get copies of the slides. Okay, let me have a look at all of the. Sorry, I've been missing the webinar chat. I've been keeping an eye on the Q&A, not necessarily the chat. Okay. Coding, fantastic. So I try to put money in my account every week, but I always end up spending it. Yeah, look, I understand it. What I said, what you need to do is open up a new account, cut the card, lower access. The only way you can access that money is to actually go into that bank, and ideally choose a bank that's not everywhere, right? Choose a Bank of Queensland, choose a St. George. You don't want to be going with a big four for this particular buffer account. So you force yourself to go out of your way completely. It's a massive pain in the ass to actually go and withdraw, and it'll increase the likelihood of not withdrawing. You actually have to physically go into a bank to withdraw. If you've got a card, it's too easy because you can tap. It's so easy. If you've got internet banking, it's that next level of ease, right? You can just kind of get on there and off you go. Very easy. So you need to make it hard for yourself to withdraw it. Otherwise, you'll have issues. Do you have any recommendations on banks? I keep hearing ING is good for this. Look, in the end, they're all good. Like, all banks are good. It's just your habits need to be good, need to be in line with it. If your habits aren't in line with what your goals are, you're going to blow it up every single time. And that's the key thing. What you need to do is work on your habits and work on your inner self-talk and your mental dialogue, and empower yourself to actually achieve your goals. Very, very important. When I was a uni student traveling Japan, I extended my trip a week by $2 a meal shopping at 100 yen stores. Fantastic. You know, these are the kinds of things that you need to do as a student and as an individual really working. You know, if you can create a few points of references for yourself that you can revert back to in times of need, it just makes a hell of a lot of sense. Like, for example, for me, the goal last year was to be able to fast and just drink water, right, for as long as possible. I built it up from 1 day to 40 hours because I was working on the 40-hour famine thing. Started reading up about it more. I upped it to 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, up to 7 days of no eating, right? And then I went a little bit overboard, and I'm not suggesting you do this, but I went to 14 days and I tried 30 days and I failed at that one. I got up to 26 days. But guess what? Now I've got a point of reference that I know if worst case scenario were to happen, I had $0 to my name, right? Everything went down and my whole life was ruined. I know that I can go without food for 7 days easily, right? I can go 14 days if necessary, right? Because I've got that tool in the toolbox. Now, I'm not saying that to impress you, but I'm just saying that to impress upon you that all of these skills and tools will be available to you and will be part of your toolbox as you build those reference points in your life, right? Far too many people sort of disregard the hard times. The hard times is what makes you stronger. Very, very important thing to take away. Okay, 5% interest on loan is more than a bank. Absolutely. But the problem is the banks will be asking a whole range of questions that you may not have the answers for. You know, you gotta entice people to help you out if you're looking for a loan. You know, if you can get away with 2%, fantastic. If you can get away with 0, even better. If you can get your parents to give it to you, fantastic. But not everyone's lucky to have that, right? Sorry, what is Finder? Another platform you mentioned, Finder. Sorry, I don't quite know what Finder is. I missed that one. Janowski, Ingo, do you mind explaining what Finder? I can't seem to remember where I mentioned Finder. Aren't there large costs for accessing super? No large cost for accessing super. You just got to know what you're doing. That's all. Yeah, so it's a time commitment. Do the research, put in an expression of interest, and you may need to fill out a form or two from your particular super if you've got super, right? How to get passive income streams. So that's more of an investment side of things, or building a business. That can be covered off on in the future. So that'll be webinar number 3, improving cash flows. Right, so I'll cover off on how to increase passive income streams. Should we even extract money from super? Most of us will be below average at our age. Absolutely. Look, in the end, if it's there, if it's available, and if you're desperate, absolutely you should extract it. If you're desperate. Now, if you're not desperate, and if you're resourceful enough to actually build up enough income for yourself to kind of sustain your current lifestyle, because you've lowered your minimum, you lowered it to your minimum viable lifestyle, and you understand the numbers, you don't particularly need to do it, because it's a resource management game. You ultimately have enough, you only have 24 hours of time, you only have X number of dollars in your bank account, right? You're only working X number of hours per week. So you've got to ask yourself, what are the gaps that you need to fill, right? If you're good, happy days, you don't need to take out anything. But if you're desperate, and if you can't seem to find a dollar, if you can't seem to help someone to get them to pay you something, guess what? You're going to need to look for other ways and means to survive, right? You got to be scrappy when it comes to this stage, because you know what other choice do you have? You know, you can't really cry up into a ball. No one's going to help you, right? So you need to help yourself, because a lot of people are in the same position. You need to empower your mind, you need to listen to the right people, right? And actually go out there and get after it. It's difficult, but if you're forced to do something, you're forced to do it. Finder or Airtasker. Okay. It's not Finder, it's Fiverr. Right? Let me write that down. Fiverr. Right? Airtasker. Right? So just Google these two. You'll find ways to make yourself a freelancer and start posting jobs. Right? There'll be people looking for people to iron their clothes. There'll be people looking for people to mow their lawn on Fiverr and Airtasker. So get on there and see if there are any jobs that you can do for people close by potentially, right? Yes, you can get the slides, absolutely. What if I don't have things or time to sell? Is there anything I can do? Well, you've only got things or time. That's the only thing you've got. Those are the only 2 options you've got, right? Your time, unless you create a product, right? But that's a thing that you're selling. And so you've got to ask yourself, well, how can you earn an income, right? You've got to open up your mind. Very, very important. This is the resourcefulness mindset that I was talking about. You need to have that growth mentality. Otherwise, it's so easy to sit down and go, holy shit, this is way too hard. I can't do anything. So chip away at it. Build a skill, sell the skill. Sell their time for that particular skill, right? There's a whole range of stuff that you can look into. You just need to find out what you're good at, right? And slowly kind of build a service from that potentially. If you're desperate for money, Fiverr, Airtasker is a good place to start, because people want people to do certain things that they don't necessarily want to do in their lives, right? Because they've got the capital or the money to pay someone, because they want their time back, right? So you want to kind of exchange your time to do tasks that people don't necessarily want to be doing, And obviously, the more valuable those tasks are, those results off the back of those tasks, the higher you're going to get paid, right? Investment hints for students. What you can look at is Raise. Raise is an app that you can download and it can automate investments for you. It'll ask a range of questions. It'll set up a little portfolio for you. You can start siphoning $2 away in there every single time you make a transaction. It's a pretty cool app. Check that out. Raise. Do you recommend withdrawing from your super? I have read a lot of articles saying not to withdraw it as it will reduce the amount you have to retire on. Absolutely, it will reduce the amount to retire on. But if you're just about to starve, and if you're completely malnourished, and if your only resource available to you is your super, guess what? Pull it out. You're gonna have to. It's really as simple as that. So you've got to prioritize. Prioritize now over the future, for sure, if you're desperate. If you can get on and move on and actually get out of these uncertain times with a little bit more confidence, you've got a few strategies up your sleeve, you can actually move forward without withdrawing your super. Withdrawing super is probably one of the last measures that you want to take. Okay? How can I reach a wider range of people to sell products? Facebook Marketplace, right? eBay, those kinds of places, right? Etsy is another place, right? You're going to have to learn, unfortunately, you're going to have to learn how to market these products, and you've got to learn where you can sell these things, right? There's eBay, there's Facebook Marketplace, there's Etsy, there's a whole heap of stuff, right? You can sell on Instagram too, I think, right? You can sell on all sorts of platforms, right? The overwhelming thought of student debt. Well, look, student debt, that's a big issue, but it's an issue that you don't really have to worry about, because the cost associated with the interest is actually around that less than 2%. So in the end, student debt only gets paid back after you start earning about $50,000 or so, maybe $52,000 per year. So essentially, it's a loan, yes, and it's debt that you have to pay back. But it's a very, very long-term debt that you have to worry about. So I wouldn't waste any kind of brain cells on that. I wouldn't worry about it. Right. Okay, so moving on, investments, information. Yeah, I can talk about investment information. Make sure you give the Student Guild some feedback around what you'd like to hear more about in the future, because I'll happily kind of present to you guys and make sure that you understand what your options are. What to do about super risk levels. Look, if you're looking for risk levels within your super, what you can do is look at a risk profile questionnaire. So Google super risk profile questionnaire, right? You can look at a risk profile questionnaire on super and answer a range of questions, maybe 8 or so questions, to give you an indication of where you could be putting your money, essentially investing your money. That's one way to do it. Okay, you can hide the account too. What does that mean? Information useful when you start working again, live on the minimum, live on the minimum, and start saving the rest. Absolutely. I love ING. Fantastic. Cool. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much. Thank you for your feedback. Much appreciated. Roundup option every time you use your credit card. Yep, that's it. Wiser app is another one. Wiser. That rounds it up and saves money for you. That's a great way of doing it. Fiverr, Airtasker, fantastic. Mentioned it. Good. With the MVL, you mentioned 2 platforms where one can find maybe a volunteer activity, invest time, talents to earn money. I haven't heard of these and did not quite catch that. MVL, 2 platforms. I can't seem to. Oh, maybe that's Fiverr and Airtasker. Yes, you can find little tasks that you can do for people. All great. Thank you. Don't buy coffee. I've saved $25 per week. Fantastic. Good stuff. Now, I'm all for saving, But if you can actually buy someone who's 5 or 10 or 15 years ahead of you, buy them coffee, they'll be very, very impressed with you, A. And B, if you ask them a range of questions about their particular career and their story, if you will, they may actually take you up on another coffee in a few months' time. Just don't badger people, right? Make sure you go in there, be as curious as you can. Open up your networks, right? Ask yourself, where do you want to be in 5, 10 years time? What kind of role do you want to be? Get on LinkedIn, link up with these people, tell them you're a student, you're keen to learn, you'd love to see their posts, right? And start organizing those coffees. So I'm all for saving coffees for yourself, but if you're buying other people coffee, I'm all for that. That's even better. You can absolutely replace your super once you earn more money. Also give up alcohol. Yes, absolutely give up alcohol if need be. I lost 7K of my super with the current economic issues. Yes, that's a risk that you have as an investor. Absolutely. There is a question in the series registration where students can input if they have any specific areas they would like to be covered more. Fantastic. Well done. Well, so guys, everyone who stayed on, thank you very much for staying on. We're about almost 15 minutes over time. Hopefully you guys got a ton of value from this. Hands up for the last time if you got a bunch of value. I hope some of you can, if not most of you, if not all of you, can come along to the next week's meeting or next week's webinar. Look forward to sharing a few more thoughts and strategies with you next week. And make sure you add as much feedback as possible, because if we can make this a hell of a lot better for you in the future and for future students, I think it's an absolute no-brainer to do so. So feedback is always key. It's always golden for the Student Guild in Griffith University. Thank you very much for your time. And make sure you thank the Student Guild for inviting me along. Thanks, guys. All the best. I'll leave you to it. Cheers. I'll make sure to send these notes over to the Student Guild as well. Chat soon. And if you're inclined, follow me on Instagram as well. Ciao.